Support Democracy Docket's work to bring you vital voting rights and democracy news by becoming a premium member for $10 a month today. You can support Democracy Docket and get exclusive access to content from me and the entire team. Sign up above or in the link below. Welcome to Democracy Docket's DNC Chair Candidate Series. Wisconsin Democratic Party Chair Ben Wikler is here to tell you about his plans for the Democratic National Committee. I'm Marc Elias. Let's get started. Welcome, Ben Wikler, to Democracy Docket.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's great to be with you, and thanks for the work of everyone at Democracy Docket and the fight for democracy.
Yeah, well, thank you, and thank you for being on again. I know we talked last year before the election about the really important and great work you're doing in Wisconsin, and here we are now after the election. So let me jump in with the question that I think is on so many people's minds. This was a difficult election. It didn't turn out the way we wanted, at least at the national level. I should note that Tammy Baldwin did win re-election in Wisconsin, which is a bright spot. But overall, we lost control of the Senate. We didn't win the presidency, and the House got a little better. And that's shouldn't be overlooked. But we didn't retake the House. So I'm sure everyone has asked you. So I'm going to join the chorus. What do you think happened in 2024? Like, what happened? What went wrong? What should we take away from all of this?
This is a central question, and I will note we don't have all the voter file data, so there's some answers we don't have yet. But we can see one thing really clearly, which is that this is the first election in my lifetime where Democrats lost the majority of people earning under $50,000 a year. And if you pull back the lens, you see that the ruling party in every country in the world, every developed democracy in the world that's had an election this year, the party in power, left, right, and center, lost vote share. The United States was not unusual in that. And the clue about what happened is that for people who don't have giant stock market portfolios that were gaining in value as the stock market shot up, it was cold comfort to say that the economy was booming. The more you say that inflation hurt you, the more likely you were to vote for change, for some other party to take charge. And we can see also that the people who heard the least from the campaign were the people who moved the most. For people who say they pay attention to political news all the time, Harris won by 8 points. For people who say they never pay attention to political news, Harris lost by 16 points in exit polling. And that aligns with what we see at the ward level and county level across the country, that we lost ground across geography. We lost ground across race and ethnicity. We lost ground especially with younger and middle-aged voters. And this is basically working folks, often who got support during the pandemic, first with Trump's signature on the check that was there because of Democratic votes, and then from support that came through in the Biden-Harris administration. But then that support went away at the same time as prices went up and stayed up, even though inflation was dropping. So you were getting help, and then it went away. Prices went up. Life seemed unaffordable. And if you weren't hearing from the candidate about what Harris was going to do to help you in your life and what Trump was going to do to hurt you, then you're just like, this isn't working for me. I want something else. And that points the way to the prescription, which is the Democratic Party has to be fighting for working people in ways that they see and feel. And that means communicating in places where people who don't watch the news get their understanding of the world. That means a lot of the podcasts and video things like we're on right now, and a ton of other ones, and YouTube and big group chats that people are on, and the places that are outside the political conversation, and fighting fights that make clear that we're on the side of working people for an economy that works for everyone, where everyone has kind of freedom and dignity and a fair shot. And we're against the folks who are trying to rig this entire country for the benefit of a tiny group of far-right billionaires at the top. And if we can lay those battle lines out in a way that people feel in their gut, I think we have a chance to win back a ton of votes from working people across the country and win elections in these next 4 years.
Okay, so that sounds right. I mean, it sounds great. You have been a very successful chair in the state of Wisconsin, achieving actually something of national celebrity and great reverence. So given the hole that we have dug ourselves into as Democrats, and given that, Trump is now in power, why the hell do you want to be the DNC chair? Like why do you want to be DNC chair?
I mean, I like running into fires, and I think the country now has a fire. We have a moment of really extraordinary threat that For people paying close attention, you can, our hair is standing on end. For people that aren't, right now, Trump is more popular than he's ever been. And I think what's about to happen is that he's going to do a series of disastrous things to try to rip almost everyone off to help the people who can afford the $1 million Mar-a-Lago memberships. And it's going to piss a lot of people off. And the Democratic Party should both build a fortress to stop those attacks from creating massive harm on tons and tons of people, and also build a sail that can catch the political energy and help to make sure that that actually propels us to winning elections. And that means building a strategy in every state. What are the fights coming up in that state that open the path to a functioning democracy and an economy that works for working people? And then building year-round organizing and communication, war rooms that can speak across all these different platforms and all these different places to all these different communities in states and nationally. And that's what we've done in Wisconsin. That has been my work for the last 6 years. And we've been able to unrig our state. We flipped 14 state legislative districts this year because we finally have fair maps that are the result of years of fighting and organizing and work that you and others have done. And if we can do this on a national level, then even though there are going to be some really bad things that Trump does that will frankly create a lot of pain for a lot of people, this can also be the moment when we rebuild the huge movement that believes in democracy and believes in a fair economy, and create something better for the long term. These moments of crisis are also the biggest moments of opportunity. And I'm running because I've been exactly in the version of this fight in my state that I love so much, that's so evenly divided. And I think that kind of intensity and focus to unite the party, fight the fights up and down the ballot, and then win elections that allow us to deliver for working people, that we have the chance to do that everywhere in this country in these next 4 years.
Yeah, and look, I think you touched on something that actually is, for me, very front of mind for kind of what the Democratic Party does. There seems to be right now uncertainty, not necessarily at the DNC, not necessarily in the state party world, but in the more general world, there seems to be uncertainty about what Democrats should do with respect to Trump. And it's no secret I come from a more oppositional approach, but I understand there is a range of views about this. So I'm curious, from the DNC standpoint, right? If you were the DNC chair, how do you think the Democratic Party, understanding that you're going to have members of Congress that are going to need to do what they need to do for their districts, and I applaud them and say they should do that. But what do you think what would be your approach as DNC chair to sort of how you treat a Trump presidency or a Donald Trump as president?
I think that there are going to be moments that come in these next years, and they're probably going to come very quickly, that will define who Trump is for and what Trump is about and who Democrats are for based on the way that we fight and the way that we show up in those moments. And that in those fights, drawing a crystal clear contrast where we are fighting for core beliefs and values in an economy for everyone, and Trump is trying to serve his own agenda, a tiny number of people at the top, that will change and build people's relationships with the Democratic Party and change how people think about those who are covering for Trump when he's doing things that are terrible. And I think back to some other fights in the past, it has been critical for Democrats to unite with a very clear kind of oppositional no answer to bad things, and then do that in a way that's grounded in what we're actually for. So think back to 2005. George W. Bush tried to privatize Social Security. And there were some, there's some like, oh, well, maybe we should kind of half privatize it. And actually, no, Democrats believe in Social Security. We want to expand Social Security. We want to support folks being able to retire with dignity. We don't want elder people to be falling into poverty. We don't think Social Security should be ransacked for private gain. And then the financial crisis hit in 2008. And thank God we hadn't put Social Security into the stock market at that moment. It could have threatened one of the only lifelines that people had in the moment of economic catastrophe and collapse. And Democrats united around that fight, made it absolutely clear, and then won in a massive way in 2006 and 2008. 2017, Trump came in and tried to repeal the Affordable Care Act and gut Medicaid, the biggest insurance program in this country that is critical for people with disabilities and complex medical needs and people of modest means and so many people. And we fought back against that. We didn't say, let's cut a bunch of healthcare for some people and meet you halfway. We said, no, we think that everyone should be able to see a doctor when they get sick. Everyone should be able to afford the care that they need. And we're going to keep working on that. We should get to a point where everyone has health coverage and no one goes bankrupt because they need to see a doctor. And so we said no to a terrible policy and fought back in a way that was grounded in every state and congressional district with people who were directly affected, on camera, talking to the Republican members of Congress about what they were doing was going to affect them. And we defeated that. We defeated the policy, and it became the defining issue for the 2018 midterm elections. And Republicans tried to sound like Democrats on pre-existing conditions. And those fights are going to come. There will be probably multiple of them. The fight against family separation is another example. The Families Belong Together movement with marches across the country and a totally clear line where Trump actually wound up backpedaling on this morally absolutely unacceptable policy that they were pushing. There are going to be fights like that. And I think that how we choose the fights, obviously we're going to have a lot of things that that we disagree with this administration. We're going to make that clear and live out our values. And some of those fights will be ones where we can actually mobilize a massive wave across the country in a way that gives Democrats the opportunity to show who we're for and who Trump is for and how he's against what the vast majority of people want. And making those the central story of this administration, I think, is a critical job that the DNC can help propel with united elected leaders and grassroots groups and unions and the labor movement, like working all together. We're going to have a chance to really define the battle lines. Trump represents a tiny number of people with a view that the whole country should basically serve them, not have a voice when they disagree, and make them even wealthier. And that is unpopular. And if we can make that vivid and make it clear that we are on the side of working folks across the country, across race and ethnicity, in rural areas and suburbs and cities, then Democrats not only can prevent some of that damage that Trump wants to inflict, but we can win a ton of elections and have a mandate to do the right thing when we get elected.
Yeah, I want to pick on one other thing that you said that I think is worth exploring a little bit. One of the criticisms that you sometimes hear from people about the DNC is that it is very focused on presidential elections, and I find it very interesting. And by the way, it needs to focus on presidential elections. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But one of the things that I think is very interesting about your background, and also in one of the things you alluded to, is in your position you had to oversee essentially the rebuilding of the local bench or the state legislature, judicial elections, other things that are going on at that Democrats have to care about other than the presidency. And I'm just curious, as if you were DNC chair, like how do you see that experience that you had balancing with the understandable pull that people have towards the presidential election? I mean, you may say you faced that actually in 2024, even in a swing state. But how do you what is that balance?
So I think that as a national party, we should be a partner with every state to build a plan to fight and win at all the levels of government. And I think one of the things that we can kind of see vividly is that doing that work makes it more possible for us to win the White House. And let me explain what I mean by that. So like right now, if Republicans hadn't been able to grab the majority on North Carolina State Supreme Court in 2022, Democrats would have a U.S. House majority right now because Republicans rigged that state and took away 3 congressional seats that where voters had chosen Democrats, so they chopped them up so that voters wouldn't have that choice. And in Wisconsin, we work in our state Supreme Court races. We have a giant state Supreme Court race coming up April 1st, which let me just say, everyone should mark their calendar because that is the first big statewide election of this new Trump era. And we're going to be absolutely fighting to win. Susan Crawford is our candidate against a far-right guy named Brad Schimmel. So donate to Susan Crawford, get involved, volunteer. Those races wind up determining the voting rights that go into the presidential contests. Those races determine whether we have an abortion ban in place and make clear who Democrats are for when it comes to issues that directly affect people in their lives. We had drop boxes banned when the Republicans had the Supreme Court in Wisconsin. Now they are legal, and I'm sure the Republicans would ban them again if they took power. The state legislative fights. We stopped Republicans from getting a supermajority in the state assembly in 22. That prevented Republicans from taking over our state elections commission, which has a bipartisan board right now. And if they had gotten that, they were talking about making it impossible for college students to vote where they actually live and go to school, for example, which would have absolutely cost us the U.S. Senate race. And if we'd won by an inch in the presidential, that would have cost us that too. So it ladders up, and by fighting in the down ballot races, you actually build the muscle and strength and the relationships with volunteers and all that, the cleaning up data in a way that allows you to be more successful in presidential contests. So in Wisconsin, our in-state team and our in-state organizing program basically became the presidential campaign in Wisconsin. It wasn't something that was then, kind of parachuted in or grafted on. And that's my goal here, is that we build through the state parties in partnership with the national party, the kind of organizing infrastructure that means that by the time we have a nominee in 2028, there's already a campaign ready to go. And we also have the campaign ready to go to sustain the House majority that we won in 26 and to win the Senate majority and win the governor's races and the down ballot, statewide and state legislative fights like this. With good organizing, every fight makes you stronger, whether you win or lose that election, sometimes for external conditions reasons, but you come out of it more ready to go for the next fight. And that's the spirit that I want to be at the core of the work in the Democratic Party. And it means expanding the pie. It means raising a lot of resources, means deep partnerships and alliances, with the whole kind of ecosystem of who we work with, very much grounded in the labor movement, the fight for working people. And if we can do that, then I think that we don't have to make a choice between winning the presidential and winning all the things that allow a Democratic president to be able to deliver change in people's lives by passing laws. I think all those things are part of the same mission, and that's the real metric of our work. It's not just winning elections, it's being able to actually create change and deliver for people. And to do that, we have to win elections, and that's why we have to build this kind of strength. And the ultimate result of all that is that people are going to have better, freer lives with more opportunity and more security and dignity across the country. And if we do that, then we can have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, and so I want to just let people know that what you heard Ben say about North Carolina, absolutely true. I mean, the state Supreme Court in North Carolina, which had been a moderate, balanced court, had struck down maps saying that partisan gerrymandering was illegal under the state constitution. Republicans invested heavily in those state Supreme Court races. They won control. They then repealed that decision, and as a result, flipped the congressional map in exactly the way he said. And that is responsible for the entire numerical advantage that Republicans currently enjoy in Congress. They also, by the way, that paved the way for further partisan gerrymandering of their state legislature. So when people read about all of the power grabs going on in North Carolina over the last few years, that is in part because they have been able to gerrymander their state legislature. And as Ben said, the pattern in Wisconsin has actually been the other way. And in fact, Ben, it leads me to my next question, which is that you and I worked very closely together, and you were a great partner, and I hope I was, in the fight for democracy and around democracy issues in Wisconsin, including around undoing partisan gerrymandering. I'm proud my law firm actually brought the case that restored drop boxes in Wisconsin, and you've been, just a hero and a champion on those issues. And it's one of the things that our audience is most interested in, is these issues of voting rights and democracy. And, the truth is that the RNC invested heavily in this in the 2024 election. Like, Mike Whatley got the job over Ronna McDaniel in part because Donald Trump didn't think Ronna McDaniel was doing enough to suppress the vote, what they call their election integrity program. And when you look at the sheer number of lawsuits that the RNC was involved in compared to the DNC, it was clear that whatever you at the Wisconsin level, and again, there were a lot of lawsuits at the Wisconsin level, so I'm not even faulting the DNC. I mean, they have to make strategic decisions one way or the other, but it was clear that the Democratic National Committee in 2024 did not view this the same way that the RNC did in terms of how aggressive it wanted the issue of voting rights and voter protection alike to be in states where you had, like Wisconsin, where you had it sort of an indigenous program. They were very supportive, I'm sure, and they were supportive elsewhere. But there's a long way of saying, I think that there are a lot of people who have questions about like what the DNC would look like on these issues under your leadership if you were the chair.
We should be really clear-eyed, as you are in this community, is that Republicans try to get power and then change the rules and rig the system to make sure that no one ever can win that power back. That is their playbook. It's that they seize control, they win control, and then they try to rig everything to prevent the public's voice from being heard. And I think that as Democrats, we should view that as a core part of the fight. we're not trying to bend the rules to give our side an advantage. We're trying to make sure that everyone has a fair shot, and we're trying to fight back against Republicans who think that the public really should have no voice in our democracy, that this should just be a handful of very powerful people on the far right who decide everything for everyone. And we just fundamentally disagree with that. And I think that these battles over voting rights, over gerrymandering, ultimately, if we win power, then we can have a real conversation about the power of money in politics and how that functions, because it should be the public's voice that determines what happens in this country. And this is a country where, is a country of working people who do not have billions of dollars to throw around. And if you look at the biggest donors in this election, it's a handful of people who want to build a system that just benefits themselves. And that to me, I think, is a core part of the DNC's job, and a core part of the overall movement for democracy's job is to pay attention to what happens with the rules. What we're watching from the U.S. Supreme Court is just ghastly, and it's going to take a long time to be able to correct and address that. But there's a ton happening at the lower court levels and other federal courts, in state courts, in county courts, all across the country, that will determine whether we actually have a democracy in any meaningful sense or not. And I think the battle is happening on all of those lines at once. And that's something that to me has been at the core of how we've thought about it in Wisconsin. And I think it needs to be part of how we think about it as a national party.
All right. The final question I have for you, is a difficult one for me. I was born, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the DNC chair, a few cycles ago, once asked me, "Why are you a Democrat?" And I said, it's interesting. I was born a Democrat. My grandparents were able to make their way, in this country because of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, a revered figure in my household. My parents, for them, what President Kennedy represented was the best of America. For me, Bill Clinton, represented a watershed moment in my young adult life, and Barack Obama inspired me and millions of Americans to be proud of the Democratic Party and everything it achieved. I worked proudly for John Kerry. I worked proudly for Hillary Clinton, who I thought would have been an extraordinary president. I was happy to assist Joe Biden in his elections. Like I have always viewed my association with the Democratic Party as a point of pride. But the reality of it is that as I look out in the landscape, the Democratic Party brand is not everyone feels that way. There has been alienation among key constituencies and people, and a diminution of what people think it means to be a Democrat. So I partially want you to say what you would do about that, but also like what gives you hope? What gives you hope that can change, and that we can restore people to seeing the Democratic Party the way, frankly, my family and I always viewed the Democratic Party, which was the party of opportunity for people like us.
Yes, this is such a profound and central question. I'm glad this is where we land in our closing question in this conversation, because the thing that gives me hope is that is in fact who the Democratic Party is. That is the fight for working people, for opportunity for everyone, the belief that no matter what you look like or where you live, the language that your parents spoke, that everyone deserves freedom and dignity and respect and an opportunity to be themselves and lead the lives they want to lead, and to have a bulwark of economic security that means that you're not perpetually at the brink of everything falling apart. That core belief is still the animating core of this party. And the thing that gives me hope is there's a shared belief, a shared recognition that these are our values, and that we need to make the case to folks in a way and fight the fight, walk the walk, and talk the talk in a way that allows people to see that is what we're all about and who we are. Now, right now, so many people only hear about Democrats from Republicans. Mm-hmm. So much of the national conversation is dominated by people who want the Democratic Party to fall apart, that are trying to break off all different kinds of groups of people and tell them that Democrats actually don't care about people like them. They just care about someone else. And to change that, we're going to have to change how and where we communicate. And we're going to have a ton more communicators who are trusted and credible messengers in their communities. And we're going to have fights that we can point to that show what this party is about. Because part of how generations of people have identified themselves as Democrats is that they've seen that Democrats were there for workers' rights, that we were there for the New Deal, that we were there for civil rights, that we created Medicare so that seniors could get access to medicine when they were in the last decades of their lives, that over and over we've made a difference in people's lives that is fundamental to what it means to be an American at this moment. And fighting for that change, fighting against those who try to change things for the worse, and then actually being able to deliver in a way that people will never forget. That is ultimately how we build a Democratic Party that people identify with as their champion and their vessel, their vehicle to be able to fight for the kind of world and life that they want to have. And that's the work of the party. That's why I'm running for chair. The only real measure of our work is our ability to make change that people feel and see, and then know who was there for them in that moment when they needed it, who was fighting back against those who were trying to take away things that were fundamental to the kind of lives that they want to lead. And if we can bring that fight, I think that we can build a Democratic Party that reflects what we know this party is all about. But it can not just be what we think and believe, it can be what people see and feel and say, and then carry that message out and build it even stronger.
Ben Wikler, thank you for joining me today, and good luck.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you so much for watching this episode of our DNC Candidate Chair Series. To stay up to date on the latest voting rights and democracy news, subscribe to Democracy Docket's free daily and weekly newsletters. We'll see you next time.